Touchdown, Chargers!
What's up, guys? Welcome into a draft day edition of Chargers Weekly. As always, joined by the voice of the Chargers, Matt Money Smith. The Bolts have selected Omarion Hampton, number 22 overall. And, Money, we went through a myriad of mocks, talked to a bunch of analysts from the Combine to, present day. And Omarion Hampton was a name that came up a bunch, and now he's in powder blue.
Yeah, and, a lot of it's just how the board falls. That's why the mock drafts are so hard, and projecting who they're going to take is hard. And you just try to get a group of players that you think would have a grade, commensurate with the 22nd pick. And it felt like there were a lot of those players. There were a lot of players that were gone. I think you look at the interior O-line, and we talked about Tyler Booker and Gray Zabel, both off the board. Defensive tackle, the last sort of elite defensive tackle, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, and Kenneth Grant. Harmon was taken 2 picks before they went. Corner, clearly, you feel bad for the young man, but there's the red flags that were brought up prior to the draft on Will Johnson. Certainly showed themselves. And look, he's probably going to go very early in the second, but first-round picks, you never want to swing and miss. You want to at least hit a double, and I think if you have a concern medically, that's where, so now that's a blue-chip player that's sliding down. And I think, just to pull the curtain back a little bit, we're with all the media, and we're all just kind of chatting and trying to figure out what they're going to do. And, there was a lot of talk about Hampton, Golden, Jahad Campbell, is kind of where and Will Johnson, before we knew about, that the medicals were clearly that serious. That's kind of where we were at. And we figured it would be one of those 4 players. And Hampton was probably near the top of that list. And it's interesting, you read the reports from Ian Rappaport. It was the Eagles that were trying to trade up to 22 to get Jahad Campbell. And that just kind of speaks to the value of what the Chargers were able to secure with Hampton at 22. I think a legitimate first-round grade blue-chip player in this draft.
And they ended up getting Campbell at 31. The Eagles did.
Anyway.
They didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, they moved up.
They moved up a spot, right?
Gave up a 5th.
Yeah. So we were in the press room and talking about a lot of the different scenarios. I would have been fine with Matthew Golden, just because it's another weapon in the passing game for Justin Herbert. We talked about the defensive tackle depth, but the thing about Omarion Hampton is, and I think Coach Harbaugh said it, he's a 4-down player. He doesn't have to leave the field. The compliment to Najee Harris, both of those guys don't miss football games. And, I loved J.K. Dobbins and what he brought to this team last year. But to know you have 2 running backs who have been as durable as they've been in their careers, obviously Najee at Alabama and Pittsburgh, and now Omarion coming from Chapel Hill to L.A. I think that's a big deal, and it's really Coach Harbaugh and Greg Roman putting their stamp on this team. This is how we're going to play. I looked at the box score from the Texans-Chargers playoff game, and obviously it was Ladd, 197 yards. Nobody else really did much of anything in the passing game. But the running game, 18 carries for 50 yards, 2.9 a pop. And obviously it's not just the running backs, it's not just the offensive line, but to know that you can have 2 of those guys getting back to that situation, let's say next year in the wild card round, and knowing you have a guy like Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton that can help carry the load and maybe take a little bit off of Justin Herbert's shoulders, I think that's a big deal.
Well, I'm going to kind of jump off something you said there right away, early, and that's durability. And just think back to last year and where we were when this new coaching staff came in, and Greg Roman is doing his presser and Coach Harbaugh is doing his presser, and we had a group of players come through and do their pressers, and they all had a very sort of common explanation for the foundation of what we should expect, and that was a physical football team, that this is a team that's going to bring it, that's going to make you feel it, and you're going to be feeling it for the rest of the week. And I think it didn't quite materialize. And if you were to point as to why it didn't materialize, we start in training camp, Gus Edwards gets hurt, right? So Edwards is never right, pretty much the whole season. He came back for that one game, and he's like, I feel great. And it's like, well, yeah, but you've been out part of training camp, first half of the season. Like, it's understandable. Like, you're not right. And then JK's having a great season, and what happens in that month that he goes away? Yeah. And even when he came back into that, he's just not the same guy. So to me, you go out and get Najee Harris not because he's the most explosive back or because he's a guy that's a home run hitter. No, because he can be there. Because when you break camp, he's going to be there. And if you want to hand him the ball 30 times, he's going to take it 30 times. And if that's for 3.9 yards per carry, we'll take it. Because we can run play action, and Justin Herbert's incredible, and that's going to work. And then you go in and you take Omarion Hampton, who these last 2 years at North Carolina, 253 carries in 2023, 281 carries last year. And receptions 29 and 38. So you're talking about a lot. 319 plays from scrimmage for Omarion Hampton in North Carolina. And one of the things that was said about Hampton coming into the draft, through the draft process, was the guy will come out of a game and it looks like there's not a bead of sweat on his body. Just like he takes a pounding and it's nothing. And so that was sort of one of the things that was listed as a strength when you went through his draft profile, is just durability. No matter how many carries they gave him, it's still totally fine with it. So I think there is something to what you said there at the start about the identity of this team, the type of team that they want to put together, and that's sort of Omarion Hampton fits right in with that, and explosiveness. Don't be fooled by the size. Yeah, he's 221 pounds and 6 foot, but this dude's got juice. I mean, freaking legit home run hitting, 60-yard runs if he gets to that second level type of juice.
The balance, the vision, and that came up. We did a Zoom with Omarion just before this, and then sat in on Joe and Jim's presser, and the fact that Drake May was his quarterback a couple of years ago, the production is the exact same, if not better, without Drake May. And it's just a testament to, I think, the work ethic that Omarion possesses. Joe talked about it. Omarion said, hey, the consistency in my game, how I attack practice, how I come in each and every day, that's what you're going to get in Los Angeles. So I thought that was pretty impressive to look at. He averaged 5.9 per carry in 2023 with Drake May under center, 1,500 yards. The very next year, 15 touchdowns again, 5.9 per carry, 1,600 yards when he was the focal point of the offense. So you know that Omarion Hampton is the player that you have to stop when you go down to Chapel Hill, and he was still able to put up this production.
Yeah, it's, when you go through all the different, if you're as big of a draft junkie as a lot of people that listen to Chargers Weekly happen to be, you've probably been through all the draft guides, but when you go through them, like I wanted to pull up our friend Dane Brugler over at The Beast, and, I think he rushed for 100 or more yards in 10 of 12 games. So you're talking about, what Joe Ortiz said about the type of player. Ted, right? He's a there everyday player. North Carolina single season record, over 2,000 all-purpose yards, and then when you go through strength, well, first of all, 6 foot, 221 pounds, 4.46 40 at that size. And then you look at the explosive numbers, 38-inch vert and just over a 10-foot, almost an 11-foot broad jump. So that's the explosiveness, right? That's a guy that's, when he's ready to hit the gas, man, he's going to hit the gas. He's got that going. You go through strengths, kind of talk about the physical traits, run strength. You talked about the lower half and just breaking freaking tackles. That's what your lower half does. And then just the initial burst for a guy that's that big to get into the second level. Only 2 drops on 80 career targets. Joe Ortiz talked about that, had 1 drop pass last year. So now you're talking about a 3-down back and good in pass protection. So workhorse, 25 or more touches in 8 of 12 games. Like that's the best ability is availability, and it's something that they struggled with last year, and they're not going to struggle with it if his past is any indicator. And
you actually asked Joe about just the depth in the running back class, because we've talked about it the last several months, how many really exceptional running backs there are. But when you list off all those things, from pass protection to being able to catch the ball out of the backfield, there's but a lot of people on X were like, well, why did we get Justin Herbert a weapon? I argue that this is a weapon for Justin Herbert. It's a huge weapon for him because he can catch the ball out of the backfield. You chew clock with guys like Harris and Hampton. You have big playability with Hampton, and you're also pass protecting for Justin Herbert. So that's why Omarion Hampton went 22 overall. What would you say to fans who were upset that they didn't get a wide receiver?
To me,
It was going to be Matthew Golden
yeah,
pretty much, right?
I just think he's a better player than Matthew Golden. I do. I mean, and look, Golden's a very polarizing wide receiver. There's people that really like him, think he's the number one wide receiver in this class. I liked Igbokwe better than Golden. If he was on the board, I think it would have been a very interesting conversation. But the fact that he was already gone, I think, made it a little bit easier. Like for our friend Daniel Jeremiah, who I call the games with, has him as his 13th ranked player in this draft.
Hampton.
13th, Omarion Hampton. Like you're not talking, you're picking at 22. And that's where that value comes in. So I think for people that wanted a wide receiver, it's like, well, and he's got, just full disclosure, he's got Matthew Golden at 14. So you're still getting value there. But to me, I don't know. Matthew Golden's 4.29. I'm not trying to knock the guy. He's a great receiver, and I expect him to be a really great player. But I'm just measuring him against Omarion Hampton, and I'd rather have Hampton. I just felt a lot better about what I saw from him, and not like I'm some sort of top-shelf evaluator, but there's certain players that jump off the screen, and Hampton's one of them. And I think there's a reason why some teams, have that, and this was widely reported. There were teams that had Hampton over Jeanty just because of the size, because he's a 6 foot, 220 pound guy that's still breaking tackles, still has wiggle, still catches the ball out of the backfield, incredible in pass protection. So I think that's it. To me, I think of all the possibilities as I look at it's hard to kind of measure what went after them. So Golden's the pick right after they select, right? Donovan Jackson, who's going to be kick inside to guard for Minnesota. Then you got Jackson Dart, James Pierce, the edge, Malachi Starks, the safety, Tyleek Williams, who's the defensive tackle that Detroit took at 28. And then you've got another tackle. The corner, Hairston, is certainly impressive. And then Jahad Campbell, who the Eagles took, Josh Simmons, the tackle. So when you look what's behind him, it's like, yeah, none of those, not one of those players made more sense than Omarion Hampton at 22. Not one of the players that got selected after them would I say, yes, I'd rather have that guy than the one they took. And I would be very surprised if any Charger fan would say, I wish we would have taken any of those, to me, unless they're just big Matthew Golden fans and wanted that wideout. They can get a wideout in the second, they can get a wideout in the third. And so I know I'm rambling here, Chris, but the one thing I would also say is we're going to have wide receivers in every single draft, man. It is the most popular position that kids are playing right now. And you saw that last year with Ladd being the 9th taken. So this may have been a little bit of a down year for a wide receiver. Next year, we're probably going to have 6 or 7 wide receivers go in the first 40 picks. That's just the way this thing's going to shake out.
It reminds me of a few years ago when Bijan went 8, and then the Lions scooped up Gibbs a few picks
12.
later pretty early. And that was really the consensus, talking to guys like DJ and Dane, that, Jeanty was the number 1 guy. But it seemed like Omarion, in the eyes of many, was the 1A. And to see Jeanty go to the Raiders, which would be fun. You see him twice a year now. But
yeah, he's a heck of a player.
Heck of a player. But 16 picks later to get Hampton in the Division II, I just think that's a win for the Chargers.
Yeah.
You want to get blue chip type players. I think Omarion Hampton is a blue chip type running back, and to get him in the back half of the first round, I think is a big deal too. We talk about defensive tackle and some of the defensive players in this draft. It seems like they're going to be set up for success in rounds 2 and 3, just based on the depth in this class defensively as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start before we go to defensive tackles, just to pick up on I'm going to pull that off because it's distracting me. To stick with your wide receiver point, right? So, I'm looking at all of Lance's grades, and Luther Burden's still on the board. Now, he won't be there at 55, but, he's got Burden rated above Golden and McMillan and Igbokwe.
Chris Collinsworth, I think he said it's his favorite guy in the draft.
So, I'll buy up all the Jack Bech stock you're selling. If he's at 55, man, if he makes it down there, great, let's go. Jaden Higgins to be that true X. Trey Harris to be that X. I think one of those 2 guys could be there at 55. Jalen Royals out of Utah State. I'm just going, I like Jalen Noel. I know that that he's more of a slot out of Iowa State, but a lot of people say, dude, that's the better receiver ahead of Higgins. So you've got Kyle Williams people love, Torrey Horton in the 3rd round out of Colorado State if he's not dealing with the injury. So I love Isaac Tesla out of Arkansas. Like, dude, there's still players. It's not like it was a one-receiver draft and you had to take Matthew Golden and you were going to get shut out at that position. But to me, like, the thing that I would be more conscious of is what I said earlier, and that's for those that wanted that pass catcher, just think back to last year, and Ladd McConkey's the 9th receiver taken. And that's the production they got because of. And then I'm not knocking all the players ahead of him. I mean, look what Brian Thomas Jr. did, what Malik Neighbors did, what Roma Dunze did, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, that's last year's wide receiver class. The year before, the Chargers take Q. Look at Zay Flowers. Look at Jordan Addison. Like, there's going to be more wide receivers. Don't freak out about that.
And tight end, I think we appropriately poured water on the Colson, Loveland, and Tyler Warren projections at that point. Loveland goes before Tyler Warren, number 10, which I thought was a little surprising to the Bears, especially when you have Cole Kmet there. Tyler Warren goes to the Colts. I think that's a really nice fit. But you were talking about Taylor.
Yeah.
You were talking about,
at 22, I was like, I can see it. There's teams that have a first-round grade on Mason Taylor and think he could end up being the best of the bunch. He's just a little bit more raw than those other two. But, I've said it on here multiple times. My favorite guy is Harold Fannin. I don't think he'd be there at 86. I think they would have to take him at 55, and whether or not that's in the cards and how he measures up against some of the trench players that they might be looking at, some of those defensive tackles, and we can get into that sort of stuff as we project what we might see tomorrow. It just feels like there's been a lot of heat. It's funny, there's a couple players that I felt like we got some heat on him, man. Like just yesterday, Tyler Booker, man, all of a sudden the heat came back. That was someone we were talking about, and I remember coming out of the combine after I had a miserable combine and taking some incoming from people about, oh, yeah, Tyler Booker, sure, at 22. Look at that guy's testing. And it's like, yeah, I don't really care about the testing for a guard, man. I'm just watching the Alabama tape, and it's like, holy cow, this guy just wrecks shop. And sure enough, he goes at 12. Gray Zabel goes at 18. And I think that, and Harold Fannin's in that category to me of Booker, is everybody was talking about him before the draft. Look at all this production. Look at the A&M game. Look at the Penn State game. And then Combine shows up, and it's like, oh, measurables aren't as great. He doesn't have the same explosiveness. Is he really as good of an athlete as Ferguson? And then now I'm hearing from people like, oh, yeah, dude, everyone's in on Fannin. Like, Fannin. And it's funny how it works, man. It's a complete circle. Like, you go through all these iterations of Shedur's going to go at 3. Oh, no, Shedur's not. His floor is 21. He's not getting past the Steelers. The draft is weird, man. Every team's got a different method of measuring players and grading players, and this is how it comes out.
Mason Taylor, you'd have to trade up to get him at this point.
Yeah.
Would you trade up to get him?
No. I wouldn't.
Just because of guys like Fannin and
I think at this point it's still going to cost a little bit too much. He's going to go on the first 5 picks of the second round. I believe that. I think there's enough heat and teams that I've heard are super high on him that I'd be really surprised if he isn't one. I should probably check myself before I say that to see best available. And where, see, it's funny, man.
They got Arroyo.
I'm like, maybe he doesn't. I'm looking at Darius Alexander, like Ezeraku. I thought the Chargers could have taken at 22. Mike Green's obviously got the off-field stuff that caused him to slide, but man, he's a heck of a pass rusher. So those must be some serious issues when teams started digging into that. Emin Wari, the safety that a lot of people compared to Derwin, his how big he is, his explosiveness. So, man, Trey Amos, the corner, who'd be really good in the Charger system. I mean, so if I just go down, right, what are we at, 32? So we'd be 33 picks down. If I go down to the 33rd player and start looking at who's available, 33 and in from this ESPN list, I love Nick Scorton, the edge. I love Benjamin Morrison, the corner. I love Jalen Royals, the wide receiver. Jack Besh, I just talked about. Give me all the Jack Besh stock. Like this is just the top 32 of guys that are still on the board. Savayanea, I might have said that wrong, but the tackle from Arizona that might kick inside to guard, that's a possibility. Obviously they're not going to take any of the running backs. Joe told us that. He said, "I'll give you a little hint. We're not going to take a running, probably
which
not
may
gonna take
work
a
to
running
their
back."
advantage now because we could see a run in the second and
so.
third round on a lot of these running backs, which I think will help the Chargers kind of push up some talent that they could potentially draft.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many defensive players left. Like if I just go into defensive tackle here and who's left and could be there at 55. Alexander out of Toledo had a great Senior Bowl. Shamar Turner out of A&M. Omar Norman Lott, the pass rush specialist out of Tennessee. I love Alfred Collins. He is a freaking monster of a human being. 6'6", 332 pounds, and athletic. He's still there. I like Ty Robinson. He's probably more of a third rounder. You know how much I love Pegues. Probably more of a fourth rounder. That's just your defensive tackles. You go through the edge, and like I said, I thought that Campbell could have been a possibility at 22 as a Raku. Like I mentioned, Scorton. I mean, man, what I'm getting at here is I'm giving all these people a big freaking name salad. There's a lot of really good players left that they're going to be able to choose from tomorrow.
Any surprises in the first round?
Yes, I still think Tyler Booker was a surprise, even though I was seemingly a lot higher on him than some other people. But at 12, that seemed incredibly rich. I was surprised Kenneth Grant went that high. At 13, I thought he'd be available. At 22, I wasn't surprised by Loveland over Warren. I had heard that there were at least 10 or 12 teams that had him rated higher because it's just a taste of what kind of, what type of tight end do you prefer. I was happy to see T-Mac go in the top 10 because he earned it. I mean, I thought that was all BS, the stuff that was coming out on him. He's such a talented kid, and we have a little more insight to his makeup than others because of what he did at Servite and how he got that program relevant again in the Trinity
How about two Servite guys going into the top 10 of the NFL draft with Mason Graham going 5 overall? I thought that was the most interesting, obviously interesting trade of the night, to have the Cleveland Browns trade out Gladstone putting his stamp down, then Duval getting Travis Hunter. And the Browns, seemingly, you see Jimmy Haslam with Dion and at the Colorado Pro Day, and you're like, okay, Travis Hunter to Cleveland makes too much sense. Jacksonville gave him an offer they couldn't refuse.
I mean, that's a huge I mean, you're really sticking your neck out on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, he's widely considered, almost unanimous, the best player in the draft. A unicorn like we've never seen, like a legitimate number one receiver and number one corner, and wants to play both. And you're just going to take a couple extra picks. We're just going to take a few extra draft picks instead of drafting this guy. Well, you better turn those draft picks into something special. And I think they got a good start in Mason Graham for sure. You put Mason Graham on the same line as Myles Garrett, and that's going to be a load. I mean, as we look at the division too, man, they got some good players. Aston Jeanty's incredible. I think you throw the word generational around a lot, but I do think it's applicable to Jeanty. He's that good of a player, and man, the Broncos, just an already incredibly scary defense, gets the number one corner.
That secondary is going to be a little tough.
Yeah, that secondary is ridiculous. With Barron in that secondary with Surtain, it's a tough division, man, and it got tougher today with those two picks for sure.
Will Johnson, we briefly touched on him. It's a bummer, but do you think that he's the type of player, if he does slide, let's say, into the second round,
all the way to 55?
I don't know.
You can take the swing there.
Yeah.
That's just the thing. First round picks, that's what you're graded on, really. And you never, and you don't want to miss. You want to take the surest thing possible with the highest upside possible, and Hampton certainly fits into that. And that's where the medical just is like, second. We'll do it in the second. First is, it's a little bit too concerning in the first. And so he'll probably go early in the second, especially like you said. If Cleveland, they're talking about trading Newsome, they could have got the corner and Hunter along with a wide receiver. So, I could see them using one of their two picks on Johnson and just saying, we had him graded out higher as a corner than Travis Hunter, and that's what we use this pick on, and we feel great about it.
Final thing for me is just thinking about some of the veterans names that we've heard in terms of maybe trade talks. Mark Andrews, George Pickens, Jair Alexander. You've heard a lot of veterans names. Do you think that we'll see any maybe veteran movement on days 2 and 3? Maybe fourth round picks or third round picks.
With the Chargers, I think Newsome would make sense if the Browns, and I would imagine they'll get a lot of traffic for him. Not sure what they want because they've already got a ton of picks. So I think Newsome would make sense. Tight end, I don't think as much because I believe they feel really good about Conklin. And I think it's more of, hey, we can take a Mitchell Evans who was hurt out of Notre Dame in the 4th round. Maybe if he slides that far, you can take Fannin and ease him in, or you can take Ferguson and ease him in, or Gunnar Helm in the 4th round or something. Like, there's really good tight end. It's a really good tight end draft, and so I think you can have patience with them by having Conklin. So I don't see, who knows, but I don't necessarily see a trade for one of the tight ends, for Goddard or Andrews. I think Newsome's the one that probably would make the most sense out of all of those, just because you look at corner, and as much faith as I have in Tarheeb and Cam Hart, you bring in Jackson and St. Juste, and I'm sure they feel great about that. But yeah, it'd be nice to have like a guy you feel like, yeah, we're going to throw this guy out there on the island and feel really good about it. And I think you'd feel that way with Newsome.
Yep. It's been a fun night.
Yeah.
Omarion Hampton is a Los Angeles Charger. Again, we went through so many different mock drafts, from Colston Loveland to Omarion Hampton to countless defensive tackles. I think that they got it right. I do think they got it right at 22 money.
Yeah, I have no question. I think that was the best player on the board that they could have taken, and I'm hoping that Charger fans are excited about it because he's a weapon. He's one of the best offensive weapons in this draft. Like I said, 13 for DJ on his top 150. If I had to project tomorrow, I hate doing it, but whatever, man. It's not. I'm not Joe Ortiz or Chad
Call your
Alexander.
shot.
I can say need versus best player available. I think if I had to guess, I think you get out of rounds 2 and 3 probably with trenches. I think it's probably trenches. I think it's a D tackle and maybe an interior lineman, an interior line. I could see, I could kind of see that being the case. Let me just make sure that I feel, like I talked about, Ratledge, Frazier, one of those guys, and then I think defensive tackle. To me, that just screams D tackle at 55, unless there's a run on these guys. So that's kind of what I would envision. You get that offensive weapon in the first and beef up the lines in the second and third.
Yeah, especially losing Puna Ford, and I wouldn't count out Edge either. I think
Edge is a good call.
Edge could be something in rounds 2 and 3 as well.
For sure.
A lot of needs on the team, but I think that they've covered a lot of things up in free agency this year. And then, hey, free agency is not over either. After the draft, who knows if some veterans, maybe in the wide receivers room, get scooped up as well.
Yeah, hey, look, they want to play physical football. So that's the identity of this team, and they're off to a good start with a 6-foot, 221-pound back. It's going to be a real hammer out there. It's going to be fun.
It'll be fun to watch. All right, guys, we will be back over the weekend with a couple of virtual pods recapping days 2 and 3. For Money, I'm Chris. This has been Chargers Weekly. Omarion Hampton is an LA Charger.